Welcome to another video on the channel, and this time we're going to be looking at an aspect of RawTherapee where a viewer has asked me a question. And so if we go and have a look over in the comments section below, and I go to YouTube, Midnight Starlight, thanks for the question. Okay, so you seem very knowledgeable about RawTherapee. Cheers. I recently started using it. I have a question. When it comes to finding and cleaning dust spots on your camera lens, no. Dust spots aren't on your camera lens, Midnight Starlight, they're on your sensor. Lightroom has a handy feature that helps called visualize spots. Yes, it certainly does. See the video. I don't need to see a video. Well, I don't. The video you're referring to is Nigel Danson, and funnily enough, he lives not more than 12 miles away from me, and never met the guy, and I don't want to. Right. So, first of all, what is it that Midnight Starlight is going on about for those of you who don't use Lightroom? So, if I come over to Lightroom, and here we've got a photograph of one of Schiphol Airport's infamous bloody sparrows, and he's having a little drink out of a little puddle of rain, and yes, the image is tilted, it's not straight, but we can see we've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4 probably. That's a reflection, but maybe 5. Another specular reflection there, so that's 6. Another dust spot there, 7. And this long streaky thing there, 8, 9, and 10. So we've probably got 10 things we want to remove from this image. And what Midnight Starlight is going on about is if we click on healing and we go to this little checkbox here that says visualize spots, now it gives you a reference. Okay, so you can more easily define what it thinks are spots. Now, for those of you who are like me and have spent years and years using Photoshop, there is a little giveaway in this rendition of the image under visualize spots that tells you at least one component that's being used here, and that's the old Photoshop filter called Find Edges. Okay, and what this is going to do is, if I turn it off, you can see that white blemish there is sort of 50% opacity, and it's fairly solid. And if we click visualize spots, you can now see that it looks like a polo mint, doesn't it? A very thin one. Now then, the thing is, you've got a scale here, and this is set at its default, which is about halfway along the scale, let's say 50%. If we turn this up, okay, to 100%, or fully right on the scale, we can see we've got an awful lot more blemishes. But it's sort of kind of hard to disentangle them from what might be structures in the image. But they're all distractions. But this sort of thing here in this big band, this sort of thing up here, and especially in the reflection of the sparrow, are dead giveaways of the old Find Edges algorithm in Adobe products. So, this is what Midnight Starlight's going on about. And how easy is it to use? Fairly easy. But we used to use a technique in Photoshop long before this visualised spots and retouching was introduced into Lightroom, and I'll touch on that in a bit. So that's the reference to Lightroom that Midnight Starlight made, explained for those of you who do not use Adobe products. So if we come back to RawTherapee, is the same old picture of the ski ball sparrow. And, you know, I mean, yes, we can go and turn on the spot removal tool, and we can go and activate spots. And why it suddenly makes this little funny change to the image, I'm never too sure, but, you know, it is what it is. You know it's active because it's dark. If it's inactive, it's sort of the same colour as the toolbar itself. But we can't see all the imperfections. Now, we used to, or I used to, and quite a lot of us who were into producing images for large prints, or even back in the day when Photoshop first came out, and it was principally aimed at the image repro side of things, where you were doing drum scans off big negatives or big transparencies, and you were retouching the scans. We used to right click on that, not on this image because I can't do that. If I go back to Lightroom and I just right click and I go edit in Photoshop, and I pull Photoshop open, and we can see the image. What we used to do was basically go and grab an adjustment or a curves adjustments layer, and then I can go and put a custom curve on it called custom retouch, and now I can get a better visualization of the spots and the imperfections. I could put an inverted version of that on, and that will allow me to see these up here, and I can basically change the rendition of the image by moving the points on the curve. And so if I was to go back onto the image and come into the image at 100%, and then use the navigator, and I'll just pick up my pen tool, and I mean, we used to use the spot removal tool and whatever other retouching tools were available. I'm just going to use the remove tool, and making sure that I'm painting on the actual image layer, the pixel bearing layer, I can just go and paint over there, scribble over there, scribble over there, and scribble over there. Okay, and if I now turn off that curves layer, I've now just removed 4 items or 4 dust spots, and in the image itself I could only ever see 1 in that sort of image area. So this is the thing about sort of Lightroom dust spot removal and dust spot removal on steroids over in the likes of Photoshop, and you could just as easily do that in any version of Photoshop you've got, though you might have to go and use the spot healing brush if you're on something like CS6 or CS5. But you know, it's there. That's it. So basically the functionality of that is that operation that we've just done in Photoshop. Well, you must be able to do that in GIMP because it's such a simple operation. But the basic functionality is driven by this curves layer. So let's now go back to RawTherapee. And we can do exactly the same thing. So if we just take a look at the spot removal tool, you'll notice here it says 1:1, alright? So they're always recommending that you retouch at 1:1. So let's come up to that self-same area in RawTherapee, and there is that one large blemish on the sensor Midnight Starlight, not on the lens. Okay, sensor. If it was dust on the lens, or even internally within the lens, you're not going to see it on your image. It's stuff that is actually stuck on your sensor that is actually blocking light from the lens from striking the photosites on your sensor, which are covered by the dust spot or little hair, whatever, bit of pocket lint or whatever. So how can we see in more detail into this area inside RawTherapee? Really easy. If I come into the exposure tab and I just go to the very first curve, doesn't really matter whether you've got it in film like or whatever, just change the curve. So what we'll do is we'll bring the blacks all the way up there. We will take the whites when I can get hold of the point. That's not got hold of the point properly. That has now. And we can take it down there and then we can pull it in here. Okay. And then we could go across there. And now you can see we've got that one we could see, but we've now got another one there and another one there. And if we play about with these curves, rather like that, and we can play around with this part of the curve. We don't want that point in there, but we can do all sorts of things, and you can save quite a few of these curves. I just have one saved here called Retouch 1 RTC, and we'll click apply that instead. And what we can now do is, this is where I get a problem with RawTherapee. It gets a bit jumpy on the points. We'll go and reapply that curve again. Apply. And let's have another go. Strike with the pen tool. Let's go and grab that point and slide it across. Okay. And then what I can do is go over here, click on there to activate the actual spot removal. Keep my finger over the control key, hold the control key down, click, and then I can just hover over that circle there. Come on, and just make the spot removal tool a little bit bigger, and then I can grab the center of it, and you can see that I can remove said spot there. The dotted circle of the source we can make bigger or smaller, okay, and try and get a better blend that way. Or we can bring the feather, because this is the feather radius here, we can bring that to bear and move it around. We can now go click on there and drag the source for the replacement down to about there. We could go and click on there, move that one to the left, and you've just got to try and see through the graphics of the spot tool to actually see what you're doing. It can be quite tedious. If I just if you hover over a tool or inside the radius of either the clone or the source and just right click, you'll make it go away, so you can start again. And we'll just start again, and what we'll do is just try and find an area that sort of sits quite well, And does that work quite well if we come outside all the tools and right click? No, that's too dark. Go and reactivate the tool and just try and make that source a little bit more matching. Let's try that. That doesn't look too bad. Let's go and activate the tool again. I mean, this is good insofar as it goes, but to be brutally honest with you, it's a little bit of a faff and a little bit of a fiddle. And we'll go in there. We'll call that done. That one's still not quite as good as it could be. And but I'm fairly certain, because we did such a good job of it in Photoshop, you could do a much better job of this in GIMP. Though I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have first clue how to get there. But if we now say that that area is done, which it isn't, not really, it's just very hard to get this to work right. But if I now come back to the exposure tab and I go and reset this tone curve, there you go, you're back to your image, and to all intents and purposes they've gone, those marks are gone. So we could come down here and we can see we've got some quite easily recognizable faults here. So we can come back to our spot removal tool and we can just simply, without putting the tone curve on, we can quite simply just click and drag, control click, drag. We've got another one there, control click, drag down there. We've got another one here which is kind of hard to see, and I'm pretty certain we've got some more in this area. So what we can do is now go and just play around with the tone curve until we can sort of see what's going on. You don't have to just use 2 points, but it does help if you just use 2 points, because it enables you to get some decent contrast shifts. There we go. So now we can see we've definitely got a dust spot here. So we could come back to the details tab. The dust spot tool is still active, and so we can control click, drag, and then maybe just come outside the area, turn them all off, and now we can see that big one's gone. Go and reactivate it again. It is extremely tedious, but you know, it is what it is. We didn't do a very good job on that one, so let's just go and try and do another one there. We've got one here, click. We'll drag left on that one, but we've got to try and line the water up. We've got another one on here, click, drag, and you're just trying to click and drag to get a contiguous infill and blend. What else? These are parts of reflections off this water, so you can fetch them out we could fetch them out if you wanted to. But I will not be bothered. If we come across here though, we've got a reflection there, a specular there, specular reflection there, and we've got this monstrosity here. So we could go to the top of this, click, whoops-a-daisy, we're not activated. Let's go and activate the module again, and we need to come into it at 100% most definitely. Let's just scroll back over to where we were, click and drag. It's a pity we haven't got a brush to do this, then click and drag, click, and we'll try dragging down there on that one, click, drag, click on that little subtle one there, drag it over to the left, click, drag. Where's the best place to drag that to? Probably around about there. Okay, and we've done a pretty good job of removing dust spots from there that we can easily see, because we've actually, if you like, inverted the image in terms of light and dark and colour. We could do this last one here. I'm going to activate it again and just control click, but I'm going to make this smaller, so I'm just going to hover over the inner circle and make it smaller by dragging down with the old trackball, and then we will just move the source, if you like, over to the left, come outside all the brush areas, right click, there we go, job done. Come back out to a fit to screen view, and then come back over to the exposure tab and just go and reset that curve to normal, and there we go. We've got another one there. We'll just come in, go back to the details tab again, activate the retouch, and where's it gone? It's here, isn't it? So we are simply control click and just drag over that way, I think, and right click outside the area, and we are, to all intents and purposes, retouched. And so there you go. That's how to not just how to use the spot removal tool in RawTherapee, but actually how to get a more accurate visualization of all the imperfections in your photograph, which I think is what Midnight Starlight was talking about when they mentioned the visualize spots inside of Lightroom, which isn't really all that good. It's good for one or two spots, but if you need to do a lot of work, if you're on Adobe products, you're far better off just sending the image with the imperfections still on into Photoshop, putting an invert curves layer over the top of it. Photoshop allows you to make real complex curves like an M shape and a W shape, which is two I use quite commonly, and you can move the points around so you can really dial in on certain areas of the image. But you know, I mean, you can do the exact same thing in RawTherapee and get a much better result than you would without using that curves layer, because even though you can't see a dust spot with the image in this sort of finalized view, let's come out to fit to screen view. Yes, I know it needs straightening, but you see, visually we've got rid of all the imperfections. But by using that, playing around with the tone curve as well, we've actually found spots that weren't readily visible in this form of image view. But if you were doing a 6-foot print, those little tiny imperfections that are hard to impossible to see in a normal view would potentially show up. And when you think a 60-inch print is going to cost you about 300 quid to do, that's a lot of money. And you know, if there's one bloody dust spot that's left on the image that you didn't notice, but the printer, because of the high density and high resolution of the printer, it actually picked it up and reproduced it. With it being such a large print, that imperfection would stand out like a sore thumb, and you would have just wasted an awful lot of money. That's why dust spotting, because even back in the days of film, you get dust on a transparency or on a colour negative, and so when you ran it through a drum scanner, the scanner would actually reproduce the dust. And if the dust was just a little tiny microscopic speck, you would not see it. But if you used an inverted curves layer over the top of it in Photoshop, you could play around with the curves until you could see it. It takes quite a lot of time to go through an image at full resolution to actually pick up all the potential imperfections. And I will say this, even though digital cameras and the sensors are prone to dust when you change lenses in dusty environments, etc., the imperfections are considerably fewer in number than if we were to go and do a drum scan of a 5x4 transparency or a 5x4 negative and take it into Photoshop and retouch that, or take it into another piece of software and try and retouch it, because because film is just a dust magnet, So anyway, there you go. I'm sort of waffling on and getting a bit sidetracked, but retouching is such an important part of your workflow, and it's something a lot of people overlook. And for those of you who aren't using Adobe products, this sort of thing, the importance of retouching and how to get the best out of the retouching, this technique I've just shown you won't find that in any RawTherapee documentation. I'll pretty much guarantee it. I haven't gone through the RawTherapee documentation, but I'll guarantee you won't see it. But you've got to admit, it works. So it's just the same old technique that we used to use in Photoshop years and years and years ago. And so you must be able to do it in GIMP. So those of you who are familiar with GIMP, now you know how to go and do it in GIMP as well, because you've seen me do it in Photoshop. Use the GIMP tools. You might find it's actually more speedy and more efficient to retouch in GIMP than it is in RawTherapee. And just the same as I find it more efficient to retouch in Photoshop than I do in Lightroom. Yeah, it's simple. And Nige Danson can say what he likes. Raster image processors excel at retouching. That was principally their main reason for existence. One of the main reasons for their existence, image retouching. And so there you go. Anyway, I've wobbled on long enough. If you're into RawTherapee and you use RawTherapee, you want to know how to use a spot removal tool, I've just shown you a layman's guide to the retouch tool and how to get the best of it with the introduction of a temporary inverted tone curve. And so there you go. Hope you've enjoyed that, folks. Hope you've got something useful out of it. Hope you found it interesting. If you did, leave a nice comment below, give it a thumbs up, share it with all your buddies, because it just helps the channel. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for listening, thanks for watching. Speak to you soon. Cheerio.